OBX Wave Report. I am your host, Robert Scribbler, and for today we are going to talk about the present wave conditions for the Outer Banks as well as the longer range forecast through Friday, where the weather models are indicating a major storm system for the eastern US. And the main issue with the forecast right now is that the low pressure development seems to be shifting over land a bit more, which would have different consequences for the Outer Banks and wave conditions here. So a little teaser regarding the forecast as we look at the NASA Worldview image for today, for the Northern Hemisphere, for the United States, the North Atlantic, and Western Europe here. But before we get into that, I'd like to talk a little bit about one of the main a primary focus for the OBX Wave Report, which is raising awareness for the impact of human-caused climate change on coastal communities. And one of the main, I would say, I don't know if the term um, bias or misrepresentation is a good term, but one of the notions for impacts of human-caused climate change is that it's and this is in many ways it's true, but it colors the way we look at things. It can seem to make some of us feel invulnerable to the impacts of human-caused climate change. It can make some of us feel like, oh, well, climate change is only something that happens to, other people. Um, and so one of these perceptions or I guess understandings of the issue is that um, there's this notion that those who are less advantaged or living in other regions of the world, such as the developing world, are the ones that are going to feel the impacts of human-caused climate change. And what is true is that these regions are more vulnerable for many reasons. One is because they are typically in the areas which will see impacts first and hardest. And second, because those regions often don't have the resources to adapt to climate crisis as rapidly as other regions. But um, there are two issues with that perception and just simply labeling that perception. The first is that one, it divides our minds. It makes us kind of think in a way of us and them. And I don't believe that that's a really healthy way to think, unless it's contextualized in the sense of, okay, we see our brothers and sisters living on the earth, and we see that they're in trouble, and we resolve ourselves to do what we can to help them. Um, so rather than seeing it as something that divides us, we should see this trouble coming at some of us as a reason to unite and rally and do justice. Um, the second notion regarding this is the sense of invulnerability that um, that I mentioned before, and so like here on the Outer Banks, we are Americans, so we are part of one of the richest nations in the world. Although what we can say about the United States is that lately there are forces in the US that have pushed US government to turn away from the interests of we the people to more so the interests of the hyper rich, the oligarchy or oligarchic and the exploitative. And so that bifurcation has also caused this internal turning away of people in the United States who might be in trouble. And anyone, I would say, living on the coastal community in the United States, regardless of their economic status, is more at risk for loss and harm as oceans rise and as storms become more intense. So this is like my this is a general view of the situation, and trying to put it in a like a healthy context for response so that we are good to both ourselves and our fellow human beings as well as our fellow Americans, and that we uphold the values of our democracy as we respond to the climate crisis, in providing equitable solutions both in the United States and around the world. So this is kind of a long draw in to the recent news today that I think I'm going to do a segment on it because it has an impact for the people living here in the Outer Banks at the local level, right on the front lines of human caused climate change, and for anyone living on the coast. And that news today is that fusion energy just took a major step forward in that the National Ignition Laboratory managed to create a fusion reaction that had a positive return on energy investment, which means that the energy that they're using to power the laser to ignite the fusion was less than the energy produced by the fusion reaction. And fusion for a long time has been seen as a alternative to fossil fuel burning. And these days, well, at this point, with this major milestone having occurred, um, those in the fusion community and the ignition community believe that we will have a viable fusion energy source by around 2040. This is certainly major news, and it adds to the potential quiver of solutions to climate crisis, which already include the fantastic energy sources that are wind, solar, and the energy storage sources that are improving batteries, which we now see in the form of electric vehicles as well, and battery storage plants. But what fusion would do is, especially if it were more rapidly deployed, is provide a base load clean energy source to add to the variable energy sources of wind and solar. Now, the question, of course, in my mind is cost and how rapidly it can deploy, and feasibility for the technologies and how rapidly they can scale. But in any case, this is good news, and it focuses in on what I consider to be the center of gravity for the climate crisis, which is getting off of harmful fossil fuels, which are the main driver of climate crisis, and rapidly transitioning to clean energy so that the impact of climate crisis, which is already starting to ramp up, is blunted, and and it gives us the time to both adapt and also learn how to overcome the climate crisis by drawing down the excess carbon. So, so here I am doing a wave report talking about the climate crisis, and that's important because all of us who surf, who live on the coastline or who enjoy coastal communities and the numerous benefits of the natural system that they provide to us, both to our personal well-being and our enjoyment, and to our lives in the sense of our richness, our prosperity, and our well-being. We are all impacted, regardless of where we come from. And surfing is a global sport, and surfing should be a diverse sport. And and those who surf, I believe, have a responsibility to be leaders in voices for climate action. So, so here, here's the unexpected intro to the OBX wave report for today. I'm going to talk a little bit more. I'm going to do a special segment on the advances in science when it comes to fusion. We're going to get drill down into that a little bit more today. But I did want to provide this intro for you today, where here in the Outer Banks, the waves are calmer, although still rideable. So this provides me the opportunity to segue a little bit into uh, one of the core missions of the Wave Report. We're here to report on waves, but we're also here to inspire positive action and to support positive action and to speak with responsible voices for positive action. So we've done that, and now we are going to get into the wave report. So right now we are looking at the NASA Worldview satellite image provided by the wonderful experts and scientists and in all the supporting infrastructure over there at NASA. And this satellite shot is from December 17, 2022, and just yesterday afternoon, and we see the march of storm systems across the northern hemisphere, one over the northern tier of the U.S. near the Great Lakes, still spinning up there near the Great Lakes, another storm system off of Newfoundland, and a third system heading into the North Atlantic. This satellite image updates daily, but it's just nice to see this visual satellite shot. And I'm going to move to the infrared view that focuses more on the United States and the coastal waters. They're a bit closer to the United States, and you can see this low pressure system still swirling off into Canada here and providing some weather up for the northeastern Canada. We've got a frontal boundary that is draped across the Atlantic off the U.S. southeastern seaboard here, providing some pretty potent convection and thunderstorm activity here just south and east of the Gulf Stream. And we've got a flow of moisture running in through the Gulf of Mexico and the U.S. Southwest. And this flow of moisture associated with a swirl here in the atmosphere is also another low pressure system, which appears to be destined to provide some strong weather impacts for the eastern portion of the US by later this week, namely Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. And we're going to talk a bit more about that because that system and how it forms is going to have an impact on the waves for the Outer Banks. Drilling down to the local level, at Jeanette's Pier right now, for present wave conditions, we have 3 to 4 foot wave heights. The primary swell is coming in at 14 seconds with the secondary swell coming in at 9 seconds. Winds are out of the northwest with a bit of a west-northwest component at 23 miles per hour, so very brisk offshore flow there. 23 miles per hour is no joke, so yeah, that's a pretty strong wind condition down there. Air temperatures are 46 degrees Fahrenheit, so with those strong winds, it's going to feel quite a bit colder. And the ocean water temperatures are now coming down a bit to 54 degrees Fahrenheit. So your cold water protection is becoming more and more important as we get further on into December, which is what we would expect. Weather conditions are sunny, breezy, and the expected high for today is 49 degrees Fahrenheit. So not a very warm day, although lately I've seen that high temperatures have tended to be maybe a degree or two warmer than the official prediction. So that high temperature might inch up a little bit, particularly with the ocean influence at 54 degrees Fahrenheit. And this is especially true as you get closer to the coast. Now, moving on south down to Avon Pier, we're going to go on past Coquina Beach, which I hear is a very good little spot on the Outer Banks, past Oregon Inlet, along past the Pea Island National Wildlife Refuge, south on past Rodant, and down to Avon, just north of Buxton here. And we are going to highlight some conditions at the Avon fishing pier, which is temporarily closed, but you can still enjoy the surf conditions there. And we find that wave heights are 3 to 5 feet with the primary swell at 14 seconds and the secondary swell at 9 seconds. Winds are out of the west-northwest at 22 miles per hour, so this is an offshore flow. Air temperature is 48 degrees Fahrenheit, so a bit warmer than conditions over at Jeanette's Pier. Ocean water temperatures are also considerably warmer at 62 degrees Fahrenheit as we get closer to the influence of the Gulf Stream. Weather conditions are sunny, breezy, and an expected high today at Avon Pier of 54 degrees Fahrenheit. And then for our last wave location, we're going to go past the big wave spot at Buxton, and it's worth noting that Buxton is running about a foot higher than Avon Pier, and the ocean water temperature is a couple degrees warmer at Buxton as well. But we're going to go down here and take a south-facing beach. I've had a bit of an east-facing beach bias, probably because the wave conditions tend to be better at the east-facing beaches, but it's good to get a sample of the south-facing beaches, and we try to do that for you when we can. So Frisco is right now running at about 2 feet, so 2-foot wave heights at Frisco with a primary period running at 7 seconds and the secondary period running at 10 seconds. Air temperatures are 47 degrees Fahrenheit, and the ocean water temperature is 65 degrees Fahrenheit. Ocean water temperatures have come down at Frisco from close to 70 now into the mid 60s. So even down on the south-facing beaches now, the water temperatures are really getting into that range where you need to start to pay closer and closer attention to your cold weather protection. So make sure that you've got your wetsuits, your hoodies, your booties, your gloves, whatever you need to maintain your core body temperature and stay comfortable out there in the surf. Of course, with those 2-foot waves, you may not want to go out there, but I don't know, get a longboard or a more versatile board. You could probably still have some fun out there at Frisco. Winds at Frisco are also coming in out of the west-northwest in the 20 mile per hour range, which is so west-northwest is also offshore here, so an offshore flow. Weather conditions are sunny, breezy, with an expected high today of 55 degrees Fahrenheit for Frisco. So a brief overview of wave conditions for today. I do want to show you this model forecast of surf height for Frisco, and also pay attention to the wind conditions here, including the gusts. And this is an indicator of the predicted powerful storm system that is now expected to impact the entire US, or much of the US East and a good portion of southeastern Canada on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. And I want you to look at the wave heights here for Thursday and Friday at Frisco, which are expected to pump up to between 5 and 8 feet by middle of Thursday, and then get up into the 7 to 11 foot range on Friday afternoon and evening. These waves are expected to be driven by rather strong southerly winds. So starting out as south and southeasterly winds, and then switching on to southwesterly winds. And with the southern facing beach there at Frisco, those southerly winds are going to be coming on shore, regardless of whether or not they're from the southeast or the southwest. But look at the wind speeds predicted in this model. By mid-Thursday, we have expected 31 mile per hour sustained winds and gusts up to 41. So sustained winds near gale force and gusts over gale force on Thursday. And then winds kind of coming down a bit later on Thursday, but not by much. And then by early Friday, getting a bit of a lull. And then the winds ramp up on Friday again into the 20 to 30 mile an hour range with some extraordinary wind speeds predicted for late Friday night between 48 miles per hour, 48 miles per hour sustained winds with a 66-mile-an-hour gust. So this is an indication of how powerful the storm system is expected to be. And just imagine if those winds were coming in off the ocean at the northeast. So southwest wind flows are not likely to produce major like tidal surges or anything like that. So we're not expecting to get major tidal and coastal flooding events at this point from the system. But if the energy maintains over land, then this is what we would expect. But if the energy goes offshore, then we could expect these winds to turn more out of the east, and then expect a um, more of an issue from the standpoint of coastal flooding and beach erosion. I'm going to zoom out here and take a look at wave conditions at present for the North Atlantic. And we're not going to dwell too much on it. I just want to show you some point observations for significant wave heights around the Atlantic. So about 5 foot significant wave heights off the Outer Banks. Actually got some stronger, well, some stronger than yesterday's significant wave heights in the range of about 5 feet as well off of Florida. And then for the Bahamas, running around 4 feet. And then for the northern facing beaches of the Caribbean, around 6. And out here just off Portugal, around 7 foot wave heights. And out off Ireland, looking at like around, let's see if we can get closer, around 10. And we have a strong storm system in the North Atlantic right now that is producing 32-foot significant wave heights way out in the shipping lanes here. And I just want to advance this really quick so we can show you how this storm strengthens and how we get 42-foot significant wave heights that are then expected to whip around and run into what looks like west-facing Irish beaches here, looking pretty brutal here with some very powerful, significant wave heights as this storm whips around off the British Isles and just south of Iceland. Moving back to the United States, I want to talk a little bit more about our storm system that is expected to form. And I have a GFS model provided by Tropical Tidbits, and I'm just going to go ahead and run this model for you guys so you can see what is expected to happen. So we get some impulses running across the southern US for Thursday, and then our storm system begins to take form with what looks like a very strong frontal boundary forming across the central US, driven by a cold high pressure system diving down from Canada into a trough in the jet stream here. We've got a series of low pressure impulses running up through the Gulf of Mexico and off the US East Coast with an apparent strong southerly flow or southerly or southwesterly flow across the southeastern and eastern portion of the U.S., crammed between these two high pressure systems. And here we go. So getting into Friday, the energy appears in this model to be focusing more on the Mississippi River Valley region as a strong low pressure system begins to form over the Mississippi River Valley just south of the Great Lakes, with impulses remaining just offshore. And I'm just going to advance this frame one more. And this low begins to bottom out in a kind of bombification intensification cycle, even as impulses continue to run off the US East Coast with a strong southeast, and southwest flow with those extraordinarily strong winds as we get into Friday. And then the storm continues to strengthen as it moves up just east of the Great Lakes And we do still have strong impulses offshore, but no major indication of a double barrel low forming, which would indicate more of a nor'easter style storm system, which is a positive development for the US East Coast in the sense of reduced risk of coastal flooding and beach erosion. And so then this storm moves on into Canada as a 962 millibar low, which is very powerful, with strong northerly winds sweeping down across the Great Lakes and into the Ohio River Valley, which looks to me like it could be a major snow event. I will leave all of that to the weather experts and meteorologists, but just looking at the storm system, it looks like it could be a very powerful winter storm for the Ohio Valley running through the U.S. Northeast. And even as just offshore conditions are about to get, well, or right now in this model looking pretty rough with very powerful southerly and southwesterly flow. Some of the south-facing beaches in Long Island, for example, and Rhode Island and up there in the Northeast could see some major impacts from this system as well, it is expected to form today in the models. We're going to have to watch and see where this low forms. If it forms closer to the coast and starts to develop a double barrel low, then the whole nature of the storm system changes. So for us, we're going to want to keep an eye on this. But right now, the models seem to indicate more of a overland low that tracks up from the Mississippi River to the Ohio River Valley to southeastern Canada as a 960 millibar low, so a very powerful low over land. And in this frame, early Saturday is a very powerful winter storm system for the northern or northeastern portion of the U.S. and the southeastern portion of Canada. So that's the present state of the longer term forecast for the OBX wave report. More likely to have more southerly swells that might wrap around to beaches such as Buxton, because Buxton gets every wave on the Outer Banks. And then the southern facing beaches are expected to get pretty stormy over Thursday, Friday, and Saturday of next week, according to this most recent forecast. But we're going to keep an eye on this for you because we're still a bit out, and the ultimate track and location of this low and how the low forms is not yet a given. And depending on where it is, we're going to get different kinds of influences. And of course, the present intensity forecast is quite high. So it's going to be a significant system one way or the other if the intensity forecast remains. And we're a little bit out here. Thursday and Friday are still a bit far on in the models, but right now it does appear that the ingredients are for a major storm for the US East that will certainly impact the Outer Banks and provide some powerful wave conditions in some respect in some locations. Before I go, I would just like to finish up with a couple of points. One, typically the OBX wave report runs from 8 a.m. until 10 a.m. And today we took a little break, slept in, got ourselves a nice Sunday breakfast. So mea culpa, if you were expecting the wave report between 8 and 10, we will be back to our regular time tomorrow, and we have some interesting developments in the future. We're going to try and level up the OBX wave report for you guys, and we've got a number of ways that we intend to do that. And I might get some help from a keen video and photography related expert. So we'll see. We'll see. And then the other thing that I just wanted to say is that I will be providing a special report on clean energy developments, which does have an impact on all the coastal communities of the US. The more rapidly we deploy clean energy, the better our prospects are for anyone, let's just say anyone in the vast diversity of all the human beings around the world who live on the coast. So thank you for joining me for another episode of the OBX. Thank you for joining me for another episode of the OBX Wave Report. And please remember to do everything you can to help save our beautiful shores from the impact